we will begin from colonial America and Restoration England, and then we will end at the Romantics. So, American colonial period. All right. Now, this will take you a little away from your immediate context, but there is a very strong relationship between England of 16th century onwards and the United States. So basically, lot many lords and voyagers, adventurers, they traveled from current England to current North America in 16th century onwards. As the result of that, there was a famous uh, kind of historical period that we call discovery of New World. New World being the North America. So we call that English settlements. So basically the British people who traveled to North America, which was not yet discovered for the rest of the world, when they traveled to North America, they made settlements there, which is they kind of inhabited the land. They started living over there. They kind of possessed those lands where they lived. Okay, they married there, their children were born, and they kind of got settled over there. And that happened in last 2 decades of 16th century. In 17th century, Puritan also traveled to North America. And by Puritan we mean the Puritan Christians. Okay, Puritan being one particular sect of Christians. And it is a very natural process, as we are aware of it through the history, that first the voyagers, the travelers, they explore a land, and then usually, as the history has shown us, the religious leaders from one particular land travel to the other one in order to convert people to their own religion. It happened to South Asia as well, to the subcontinent as well. Okay, first the travelers and the traders came in the form of East India Company in the subcontinent, and then later on, religious, missionaries, they came to this part of the world. Okay, sometimes they spread the message of God, sometimes they spread message of love, sometimes they established, schools and colleges and universities. Nobody would know better example than you yourself. Okay, so FC College, for example, belongs to those times when people from the British Isles or part of the North America, they traveled to this part of the world and established many colleges, including FC College. But this example is for America. This, the information that I'm providing you, it is about the North America, not about the subcontinent. So one major adventurer and traveler who traveled from England to North America was Governor John Winthrop, born in 1588, died in 1649, and he, in his very famous phrase, announced that he was going to, along with his other British people, he was going to establish a city upon a hill. Okay, this is a phrase which is very common in in American political rhetoric. Okay, and by that they mean that a great new city was established on the top so that it spreads light to the rest of the world. Okay, so this rhetoric is still there in today's America. But the individual who used this phrase for the first time was Governor John Winthrop, who was a British. So in the earlier America, therefore, there was a nationalist spirit as well as a religious element of Puritanism in North America. Okay, where the national spirit came from, that spirit actually came from the British. And along with that national spirit, which is spirit of being British nationals, along with that they brought the religious sentiment as well. Okay, so you can imagine that in North America there was a kind of mix of nationalism and religious puritanism. And that is why the literature which started to be produced in North America in 17th century and 16th century, that had a mix of both the elements, which is nationalism and religious element. One major American poet we know from those ages is called Edward Taylor. Okay, approximately born in 1642 and died in 1729. So this is colonial period of American history, uh, and colonized by whom? Colonized by the British. So while this kind of stream of colonization was continuing in one direction, in Britain itself there was emerging what we call new classical period. Okay. In fact, in the last presentation, Nadia referred to that, and in my own presentation, I kind of obliquely referred to that. But then, what exactly new classical period was? So first, it approximately ranged between 1660 to 1785. Now, new classical period is, you know, traced back to English Civil War and ends at the age of Romanticism. In fact, the rest of the presentation will be about this time frame. And the new classical period is also called the long 18th century. And the reason for that is too much happened in 18th century. You will get to know about that in this slide and the next slide. First thing, what happened in the new classical period is called the Restoration. Restoration was a kind of political movement which advocated the institution of monarchy in England. So it is called reinstitution of monarchy in 1660 when Charles II was made the king. In those time, in the Restoration time, one of the major pieces of literature that was produced was none other than Paradise Lost, written by John Milton. Now this poem, Paradise Lost, I mentioned that in one of my previous lectures. It was a conflict between the Satan and God. And Milton narrates the story through what we call iambic pentameter. In this epic poem means a very big poem, where the Satan rebels against the God. Okay, and we see the whole fight being narrated through the story. So some people argue that in fact Milton had by God in his mind, he had the king. So kind of God stood for the king, while Satan stood for the people. So if we read Paradise Lost from this perspective, and if we interpret the poem from this perspective, then Paradise Lost becomes a political poem. So basically Milton was using the political circumstances of his own times in his poem. But there was lot of reference to the Bible. The whole theme was taken from the Bible, and it is a biblical story, we are aware of that. Now, in late 17th and 18th century, still the most important and the most read books in England were the Bible and the Book of Common Prayer. both of them religious books. But then, along with that, there rose a popularity of a few other books. One of them was The Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. Now, what is interesting to note is The Paradise Lost. If you take The Paradise Lost, if you take John Bunyan's The Pilgrim's Progress, and other books of those times, which is New Classical Period, what you notice over there is that there is a mix of humanism and scriptural notions. Do you get this point? Where the humanism came from? In fact, this is what we discussed in the last class. By humanism, we mean that the writers try to assert the human authority through the text they wrote. Okay, for example, John Milton's Paradise Lost is a poem in which he has the Satan as a hero. This is shocking for the people whose favorite book is the Bible. Are you getting this point? So whose authority was being asserted through this book? Not Satan's, but Milton's, as a poet, as a human. Okay, so he was exercising his own human imagination against whatever the scripture had told previously, whatever the script had told previously. Okay, so the truth that comes from the Bible, it is a kind of absolute truth. You cannot challenge it, you cannot deny it. Okay, but if you play with it and if you give different interpretations of it, that means that you are asserting your own intellectual authority over whatever the Bible is telling you. Okay, so in other words, we can say that the writers started using their imagination and they started being creative and they started asserting their own imagination through creative arts, through poetry or through such other art. All right, that is why we say that there was a mix of humanism and scripture. Rather, sometimes we see that human imagination was overriding whatever the script had told, whatever the Bible or other religious sources had told. Okay, so there was a kind of fight between, if we could say that, between the literary figure and the church figure. Okay, a kind of conflict between literary figure and a priest. Are you getting this point? Is that clear? Okay, so not a real fight in the real world, but a fight in books. Okay, so probably the Paradise Lost is one good example of that kind. So the Bible portrays the Satan as a villain. Do you know that? So does all other religious books. Okay, Satan is a villain. But here comes a poet in 16th, 17th century, John Milton, who writes a poem, and in that poem he presents Satan as a hero. So he is already playing with the biblical ideas. Okay, and this is what we call asserting humanism. That is human thought over the thought of the scripture. All right. Now, technically, what we say is that Paradise Lost was kind of mix of Greek, Latin, and the Bible. So there was a lot of reference to Greek mythology in the poem. The verse form that Milton uses, that verse form is Latin. So in fact, the pentameter that we are aware of, it comes from Latin. And then the Bible, of course. Now, these three are what? These three are classical examples of classical literature. Okay, we have Greek literature, we have Greek Latin literature, and the Bible comes from like 200 years down the history. Okay, so in the new classical period, therefore, what we see is that there is a re-emergence of, or there is a rise of classical literature. So classical literature is being embraced once again. Okay, so what do we mean by new classical period? New classical period, therefore, is a period in which that kind of literature was written, which was directly inspired by the historical classics, by the long history of literature. Okay, now you might recall when we talked about the medieval period, the Middle Ages. Why got the Middle Ages dark? Because in the Middle Ages, all those Greek and Latin intellectual sources, they were forgotten. But in New Classical period, they were re-embraced. Okay, so New Classical in the sense that the New Classical period re-embraced the classical literature. So that is why we call this period 1660 to 1785 New Classical period, and the major writers from that age are John Milton and John Bunyan. It continues. We were just talking about the Restoration, okay? The Restoration movement is one movement in the New Classical period. But then there are other examples of that as well. For example, the Restoration plays were there too. One of the playwright in those times was called William Congreve, 1767 1667 to 1729. The Restoration plays, they are very famous plays in British history. They are famous because of what we call comedy of manners. Anybody can guess what comedy of manners might mean? Comedy of manners. You know what is a comedy? Have you ever watched a comedy? What happens in a comedy?
They try to make you laugh.
Okay, they try to make laugh by their expressions, by their actions. Okay, how do they do that? By making fun of something. Very good. By making fun of something or some other people. Okay, so if you watch that famous TV program called Hasbe Hal, so how that character makes us laugh? By making fun of other personalities. Alright, so sometimes he will become General Musharraf, and sometimes he will become Putin, and sometimes he will become, what is that, Qureshi. You know, he kind of assumes the role of those various real people, okay? And by mimicking that, he kind of makes fun of them, okay? So when he mimics them, when he copies them, what does he do? He basically, for some time being, he adopts their manners. All right, he adopts their manners. How he speaks, how, for example, how our prime minister, kind of makes comments about a certain issue, or how he kind of gesticulates, how he moves his hand, how he moves his lips or eyes, or very small manners, but that the actor's achievement lies in the fact that he or she notices very small, minute things in those real people. Okay, adopts their manners and then mimics them, and that makes us laugh. In the similar manner, in the comedy of manners, it is a certain form of drama in which the characters make us laugh because of the manners which they make fun of. Okay, so we do not laugh because of their words, we laugh because of their actions which they perform on the stage in front of us. It was very famous in the Britain Isle. Okay, comedy of men. It was performed on the stage, okay, on the theatre, and people used to go and watch it and laugh with the characters. So it was stylish, it was urban, and it was cynical. So the rest of these plays were called comedy of manners. They were called the Restoration plays.
So what do you mean by cynical?
By cynical, so cynic is a person who is fed up with immediate reality. Okay, so these playwrights were very clever. They were writing plays in the Restoration period when the institution of kingship or the institution of monarchy was re-establishing itself. So it is very hard to speak creatively when you are being ruled by a strong-handed king. Okay, so in a very clever manner, therefore they had to express their discomfort with the institution of kingship in a manner that nobody should censor them, okay, or nobody should maybe put them, in jail. So they used a kind of, comedy of manner style so that they could say a lot just through funny words. By being cynical, we mean they wanted to convey this message to the audience that they were not happy with the political way they were being handled in the world. Okay, so if you want to read a cynical work in our own times, probably one of the best examples is Muhammad Hanif's Case of Exploding Mangoes. It is a novel. You read it and you will get to know what do we mean by being cynical. Okay, so if you are cynical, that means you know how bad circumstances we are living in, and you are totally hopeless about it, or you are totally desperate about it. So there was poetry as well in the Restoration period, which is kind of, subclass of New Classical period, and that poetry had urbanity in it. By urbanity we mean the values of city life, and that poetry had wit in it, which means creativity. One of the major poets was Alexander Pope, and he also did New Classical imitation. That is, he kind of copied the great big poets from Greek times. Now, when we notice this word, especially urban and urbanity, what probably should come to your mind is urban as opposed to rural. And what is the difference in that? So, rural is recognized because of its conservatism. I'm not saying conservatism is good or bad, but rural is recognized because of its low pace, its conservatism, while urban is recognized because of its experimentation, progress, new life. Okay, so when we say that in this poetry there was urbanity, by that we mean these were the poets who were not representing conservative thoughts, rather they were progressive. Okay, they were trying to give new ideas, like evolutionary, revolutionary. I think so. Yeah, probably we can use the word revolutionary in their own context. Yes, they were revolutionary. Yeah. Now, this is a kind of unusual change and a very big change that I'm just going to refer to, and which took place towards 18th century in England. And the change was this, that for the first time in the English history, the literary figure was participating in the public sphere. It might sound surprising to you that before this time, the literary figure was not recognized as participant in the public sphere discourse. By that we mean that lawyers had a lot of say in the social setup, the politician had a lot of say in the social setup, but it never had happened before that you invite a, a literary figure to speak on an issue in front of the audience. So in fact, the creative arts, the short story writers, the playwrights, the novelists, they were not considered to be contributors in the evolution of the society. That figure had not risen yet in that particular context. Nowadays, you invite Mustansar Hussain Tadar and Ishfaq Ahmed. I mean, he's no more, but when he was alive, people used to invite these people to campus to speak on various topics. Are you getting my point? It was not the same way in the whole history. Okay, not at least in the Britain. It was only in 18th century that people started realizing that, well, these people who say poetry or who tell stories or who write plays, they are also people of some importance. They are also intellectuals. So let's recognize them as such. All right. So this is a major change that took place in the history of Greek literature. And what was the consequence? and it was pretty, kind of rampant consequence that of literary author as a figure in public sphere. The consequence was that many of these literary figures, they became kind of vanguard of what we know as enlightenment. Okay, so the word enlightenment, I'm sure you have heard this word before. Anybody who would like to give a synonym for enlightenment?
Logical reason.
Logical reasoning. These are two very important constituents of enlightenment. Okay? Enlightenment is recognized because of these two very important ways of thinking. Kind of, thinking based upon reason and thinking based upon logic. Okay? So logical reasoning, or enlightenment for that matter, the center of that is considered to be Europe, especially the Britain. Okay, but of course, it is the whole Europe. Now, the pioneers of enlightenment included people like Voltaire, who was a French, Immanuel Kant, who was a German, Benjamin Franklin, who was an American. So enlightenment begins, therefore, in 18th century, beginning of 19th century, when these people from various parts of the world, they were writing. And these people, Voltaire, Immanuel Kant, and Benjamin Franklin, they are recognized to be both literary figures and intellectuals, political intellectuals, so to say. And now we come to recognize the geographical complexity of English literature. That is, Daniel Defoe, for example, was an English writer. Samuel Richardson and Henry Fielding, both of them too were English writers. On the other hand, Jonathan Swift was an Irish writer, Anglo-Irish writer. So basically what we call the Britain, it was spread over lot many places. Ireland is obvious example, but the other example is America too. So Benjamin Franklin, for example, even though he was an American and writing from America, but because America was being ruled by Britain before the Revolutionary War in America, therefore Franklin would have as much identity as an American as he had as a Briton. Okay, so that is why we understand that the geography of English literature was pretty complex. And now here we come to the rise of English novel. So English novel, or novel for that matter, is not an old form of literature in history of English literature. Okay, it started emerging with Richardson, who wrote Pamela in 1740, and then Fielding, who wrote Joseph Andrews in 1742. Fielding, in fact, is said to be the first major British novel writer. And then along with that, there emerged what we call literary criticism. We are still talking about 18th century, the Restoration time. Samuel Johnson, for example, wrote lives of the most eminent English poet. This is a book of literary history and a book of literary criticism. And then he also compiled the first dictionary of English, okay, which again was a milestone in the history of English literature, because before that a dictionary of English did not exist. Okay, now a few words about the America early national period, and then in Britain Romantic period. Now kind of the colonization that I refer to, that of course comes to an end, okay, and it ends properly starts with the Revolutionary War, which spanned over 1775 to 1781. That war was by the American natives mostly against the British rulers. Of course, the result was the rise of American nationalism. So there was a very important document which was declared and signed in Pennsylvania, basically, is called Declaration of Independence of the United States of America, 1776. So, the year when United States was created as a nation. Now, along with this independence of the United States of America as a nation, we had the rise of prose, non-fiction prose from the United States, and that prose was about the political ideas. So we had people like Thomas Jefferson as a political writer, William Hill Brown, who wrote The Power of Sympathy. It was the first American novel. And then we had Tom Paine, who wrote Rights of Man. Very interesting and useful book. His argument was that the American Revolution that took place between 75 and 1781, he argued that that revolution was meant for the whole humanity. Okay, we can agree or disagree with this argument, but he was making a huge argument. His view was that this was the last big revolution in the whole human history. Of course, things changed afterwards, but his view was that a better revolution for humanity cannot be thought of. So this is for the whole humanity. This revolution is an emancipation for the whole humanity.
Sir, is this a contrast to both American and Britain romantic period?
No, I haven't started about the romantic yet. I'm just talking about early national period. Okay, let me come to the romantic. In fact, is the Britain romantic period. I'll come to that. Okay, so the United States liberated, but English language stayed on. Now this is a kind of paradox about the United States, and probably this is the only time when I can tell you why it is important to keep speaking about the United States while we are discussing or while we are trying to focus on English literature. The reason for that is that the United States, even if they got rid of the British colonization, they embraced English language. Okay, they embraced it, they adapted it, and they kind of contributed it to the degree that they made it their own. So when we say English literature, it's not possible to think of English literature without the literature which has been produced by Americans in last 200 years. All right, and this is a kind of major shift which is taking place in last 15 to 20 years, that people have started recognizing American literature as English literature. So this period kind of spreads over 1775 and to 1882. But along with that, in the Britain, there was rise of what we call Romantic period. Okay, so while the British politicians were losing war at the hand of the Americans, in Britain itself there was the rise of what we call Romantic period, which spread over 1785 to 1832. So these are the writers of the Romantic period in England. Okay, this is not about America, this is about England. So we had William Wordsworth, who wrote about nature, S.T. Coleridge, who wrote about imagination, Lord Byron, who wrote about romantic ideas, Shelley, who wrote about myths a lot, especially he incorporated a lot of biblical myths, and John Keats, who wrote about aesthetics, beauty. Okay? So these are said to be five major romantic poets of Britain.
Sir, there was no romantic movement in United States or any other.
So after this lecture, in the next lecture, we will be beginning with the influence of these romantics on the American writers. So the American writers adopted British Romanticism in a different manner. We call it transcendentalism. Okay, but that we will discuss in the next lecture. Right. Any other question? So this is the end of this session.